Welcome everybody to episode 1 of Range Days. We have a great one to kick off this series. Ping G410 versus Ping G400 LST. We're going to head over to the bay and watch Dan take some swings and get some data for us.
We're now in the bay. We've got Ping G410 comparing to Ping G400, which is a really popular head last year. We're going to take some swings with both of them, get you some numbers, and take you along for the ride with us. Okay, now we're switching from 410 to 400, see what sort of differences we find. So Josh, we're back. We've got 10 swings visually shown right now, 5 from each head. Maybe it's a good time for you to dive in on a couple things. First of all, the questions that everyone's going to ask right off the bat is, what ball do we use for the testing, and why do we choose to compare G400 LST to G410?
Okay, the ball we used for the testing, we went with the Callaway ERC Soft with the triple track. We went with that because, honestly, we wanted to try the golf ball as well, and it gave us a good chance to test both at the same time. That same ball was used for the entire testing with both drivers.
Okay, and then the second question, Josh, was why G400 LST versus G410?
I'm holding them both here, and I'll bring these up a few times during this episode, but the reason that we went with these two is really twofold. The first being that in our testing last year internally, the G400 LST was the highest performer from the G400 line. Now everybody's going to have their preferences depending on their swing, with whether they like draw bias or rear weighting or max and so on. And then the G410 Plus, one of the answers we got when talking to Ping was that it was a little lower spin. And with the adjustable weighting, being able to move the CG, we thought it would be the best way to test them both out and find out how they changed and how they compared to each other.
Great. Josh, I think it's probably good to chat a little bit about the technology, but the one thing I wanted to talk about right out of the gate was the most visible thing for me, which was the crown tech. They call it Dragonfly technology. The head you guys can see on the right side is the 400, which Josh is also holding up, with the 410 on his left. The 400 is quite busy on the top, and when I picked up the 410, the internal profile of Dragonfly with the two rigid elements coming from the back actually framed the ball extremely well, and it's something that that just immediately resonated with my eye and the way I like to look at a golf club.
Yeah, and you kind of nailed it, that the internal Dragonfly, while sounds like a marketing buzzword, and in some ways it is, really changed the dynamics of this driver. The G400, which I'm holding here, you can see there's a lot of different lines, and you can see it throughout the imaging. And then there's some bumps in the back, the speed trips, that I'll just refer to them as the technical term of bumps. When you get to the G410, it's very streamlined, and I think it frames the ball exceptionally well, leading towards the turbulators, which are in place for a specific reason and do work. So I think that what they did improving that was tremendous across the board, and I think it was one of the first things we noticed.
Yeah, the next thing that's probably worth talking about, Josh, is movable weight technology. They have some new tech in the G410 that's quite distinctly different from what they've done in the past.
Yeah, and they can probably see this in this screen, and we have some images. Um, it allows you to change this tungsten weight, which is pretty heavy, from neutral, where it is now, to draw and fade. And those are the only chances you can make. Now, there's a lot of drivers out there that have a slide and you can pinpoint exactly where you want it. And the early thoughts were, well, why are they only giving you 3 choices? I kind of like the idea of 3 choices. I don't think moving it in quarter-inch segments is going to make a difference for a lot of golfers. This gives them very easy visual technology of, okay, I know I want it in draw, I know I want it in fade, or I know I want it in neutral. The weight coming all the way out, I will say they should be selling some extras of these, because I have a feeling some people are going to drop it or lose it in the grass.
Yeah, we have certainly been privy to that. So, Josh, up on the screen now. Actually, before we get to the actual data, and I'm going to just throw the Showdown pick back up real quick. One of the other things we had talked about a little bit was the shaft length and how Ping is kind of going about it differently than some of the other manufacturers out there. Talk to me a little bit about what you saw there.
Well, Ping is known as a pretty traditional company. They don't stray. They're titanium crowns, not carbon fiber. Last to the real movable weight technology, but they make a really solid product. One of the areas that's kind of new age is going longer shafts, increasing club head strength, increasing club head speed, and Ping is one of the longest out there. Now, you can make the case it's for fitting, and it's much easier to shorten a shaft than it is to lengthen, and that's true, but they're coming in at standard at 45 3/4, whereas most off-the-rack companies, and I'm going off memory here, are at 45.5. I think TaylorMade is the only other one at 45 3/4, with Callaway, Cobra, Titleist, and some others coming in at 45.5. And for instance, like the Wilson Cortex, I think came in at 45 even, along with the Mizuno. So 45 3/4 is aggressive. So I urge people who are going to try this out, make sure you pay attention to that when you're doing your testing.
Yeah, I also noticed, just looking at the shaft itself, the stock Alto, which comes with it, has a bit of a counterbalance profile, which is pretty interesting as well.
It is.
So I think we took 10 swings. We are going to spend some time talking about the 2 best from each and the worst from each. Here's a quick snapshot for you guys while we kind of dive into that. And I think no better opportunity than to just head straight into my best strike with the G400. Josh, what do you see here?
Well, I see a shot that most people will envy. And if they look at the arrow on the bottom right, they see, I mean, we're talking millimeter heel, millimeter high. That's virtually dead on. Angle of attack, 1 degree up. 2 things jump out at me. First of all, congrats. You're a pretty darn good golfer. Second thing, a little spinny at 3150. That was a little surprising for me, being the LST head, but nothing major. And that's not spin is going to change as you move millimeter to millimeter. It's going to change a couple of hundred RPMs. The surprising thing to me, while this is an incredible strike, is you caught it nearly dead center and the efficiency is 1.41. And slightly high can take a little bit away, but I'm going to give a quick graphic here looking at this driver club head. All drivers, if you were to break this up into a tic-tac-toe, and I shouldn't say all, but most drivers are going to be similar in, if you go high, and let's play in between the lines here. If you go high, you're going to get higher launch, lower spin, and lower speed. If you go low, you're going to get lower launch, higher spin, and higher speed. And if you go middle, you're looking for the best. In this case, slightly high, I mean very slightly heel side. Again, this is virtually as dead center as you get, and 1.41 efficiency was a little surprising. But overall, and they're going to know a little bit more as we move on here, why the efficiency makes a little more sense and what we're going to see as we move forward.
Yeah, and I definitely, one thing we had talked about while we were running through range days, Josh, was what defines the best strike of the bunch. And one of the things I kept leaning towards is, okay, which one did I hit right on the center, right on the button, as I like to call it. And when I saw this location, I thought, this efficiency must be really high. So the 1.41 actually really surprised me. And you've said a lot about this, so I say we kick it over to my second best strike with the G400, which shows a little bit better efficiency, but we're also a little bit more towards the toe and a little bit higher on the face.
Yeah, and that's where it got, for years there was talk of high and towards the toe slightly being what people called a hot spot. And really, that wasn't the case. What the hot spot was is it was reducing spin and a little bit of speed, but because club heads were spinnier, the ball went further. In this case, it's showing that this might be a little bit of a hot spot there because you're 5 millimeters towards the toe, 3 millimeters high. The efficiency actually went up. Spin went down as expected. Launch angle went down. And again, great strike. We're talking 2 millimeters. That's a tiny, tiny bit. But overall, the strike technically was probably a little better, even though you missed it, at least as far as the data is concerned.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating seeing the efficiency rise. And I think probably a good time now, since we've seen a little bit on the middle of the face, a little bit towards the toe and high. I believe we're going to move on to my worst strike with G400, which is actually pretty much dead center on the head, but down lower in the face. And the first thing I see, Josh, is a big, big jump in spin.
Yeah, when you go down, you're always going to get that jump and spin. You're always going to get a pretty good speed. This one, you actually got the club head going a little faster. The efficiency was surprisingly enough as fast as and as good as the dead center strike. But launch angle goes down, spin goes up, and that's exactly what we saw. And but by the way, if this is the worst strike that you make, like Dan here, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that was the one thing we noticed, and it's going to carry over into G410 too. But one thing that Ping has always kind of presented for me was decent accuracy overall. I've never found it to be the hottest club out there in total, but I've always found it to be quite accurate. And if we overlay the actual down the range profile, I think distance to center is pretty efficient on both heads. The one thing that surprised me with this specifically was that I think I'm like 4 or 5 millimeters down from the best strike, and we're actually still in the same efficiency. So I think for that regard, it's quite a positive for Ping.
Definitely agreed. And we're gonna, as we move to G410, we'll see kind of that same pattern with a little bit of twist.
Yeah, well, in that case, Josh, let's send it over to best strike with G410. So we've got higher efficiency here.
This is the one that's going to make people jealous, by the way.
Higher efficiency here, Josh.
Yeah, so you caught it. We're talking, again, virtually dead center. Higher efficiency at 1.43. Still not as high as I would have liked to see, but really good. Launch angle just under 15. Backspin at 2,700. One of the cool things here, and it's not marked with an arrow, is you were actually slightly down on attack, which normally would mean a little spinny. Now, granted, the 1 millimeter high may have a role in that, but this was a really, really good golf shot and kind of goes with what we saw with the 410, which is centered contact.
Yeah, this surprised me a lot. I'm about a degree and a half down compared to, I believe, my best strike with the G400. And somehow I'm also nearly 300 RPMs a spin better. That surprised me a lot. And I know people took our idea of apples to oranges when we talked about LST and the G400 and then the standard G410. This was a big surprise for me looking back at the data.
Me too. And if you can flip to the second best shot, I'm going to explain
head there now.
How we follow the trend. You know, you hit the next one a little low, backspin jumps up, launch angle jumps down, efficiency still really good. And I'm going to make the case that through here, which most golfers are going to be through this little area here when they hit the ball, we hope. This club was extremely, I'm going to use the term forgiving, because the strikes were similar across the board. You were getting the same type of data regardless of where you hit it there. Now, it wasn't the best data I've seen, and it wasn't the most efficient club head speed-wise. But when people talk about forgiveness and they're talking about it online, they're not talking about ball speed retention or spin retention. They're talking about playing from the fairway, and every one of these shots was just like that. Yeah,
and we're right about the same attack as I had with a number of my G400 strikes, about as low as I believe the worst shot was with the G400, and yet our spin it's like 3,000 RPMs, 3,100, and efficiency is just as high. Like I think 6 millimeters down and a fair bit away to have an efficiency at 1.42. I'm actually really impressed by that. But let's go ahead and kick it.
Impressive.
Let's go ahead and kick it to my worst strike. Might be my worst strike of the day too. Way up on the toe, way high on the face. The spin number is reflective of that, I think.
They do, and one of the funny parts about this is 23 millimeters towards the toe and 15 millimeters high sounds worse than it is. We miss there in every round. Most golfers do. If you're an average golfer or a better than mid-handicap golfer, you're going to miss there once or twice a round in most cases. In this instance, as expected, launch angle high, spin low, but efficiency was still decent. It was down, but you're talking about keeping the ball in the fairway, and that kind of shot staying in the fairway is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of gear effect. I think you're gonna see probably a comeback to center, or maybe a soft fade. But at the end of the day, Josh, I think this becomes a very playable shot. The efficiency didn't really concern me. I was definitely outside of the realm that I wanted to be in. But overall, I think this is a very playable shot. And as we kind of wrap up our main focuses on each shot, I'm just going to cover it up with the showdown image again so we can kind of wrap up our thoughts on the two. Maybe the most surprising thing for me was the spin rate and the efficiency between the two. Efficiency on the 410, I think, is definitely improved. And outside of that, maybe the visual profile overall. I know this is something we had talked about quite a bit while I was down there at THPHQ. What do you think?
Well, I would say first and foremost, the visual is 100% better. People talk about colors when drivers get released and looks and finishes. The G400 is a crazy busy driver with lines going all the way through it and bumps all around it. The G410 looks excellent. It frames the ball well. It reminds me of when you pick up, if you're not a mallet putter person, or even if you are, and you pick up that mallet and you look at it and you're like, well, it might not be for me, but I don't think I could ever miss my line with that kind of putter.
Yeah.
That's what the G410 does. It frames it extremely well. I do find it interesting. It frames it slightly towards heel side, but neither here nor there. Once you get it set up over the ball, it's going to look great. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the G410 does seem to spin a little less than the G400. It seems to spin similar to the G400 LST, which is a very positive thing for a club that was known a little bit, at least throughout a lot of testing, as a little spinny, the G400 line. The G410 didn't seem to have that issue. Came away very impressed. It wasn't the fastest thing we tested or the most speed efficient, but very impressive, and I thought it sounded great again.
Yeah, it sounded really good, and probably one of the most accurate drivers. I don't have all the data in front of me, but once again, looking at all 10, finding the middle of the face was great, and finding the middle of the fairway, I think, is very realistic with a head like this.
One of the things that we talked about when you were doing your testing is when we're going through a bunch of drivers, and every driver that is on the market in 2019 was out there with us. When you pick up a driver, the different weighting, whether that's swing weight or just feel, even grip, takes a couple swings to get used to. With these, it really didn't. You picked it up, hit it, and said, let's roll. It was ready to go.
Yep.
And that's continued in for more testing here. And one thing that I do want to address is when we brought this club back to the lab and checked it on the specs, it was swing weight was dead on where it was supposed to be. Loft was dead on where it was supposed to be, within 0.25 anyway. And everything was kind of dead on what it should be, and that's a testament to the company.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on your comment, going head-to-head as well, obviously manufacturer to manufacturer could be a little bit of a larger stretch, but head-to-head, it took me, I thought I'd have to take a couple practice swings, but for those big Ping fans out there who are looking to make a change for G410, I think it's going to be a really simple slide-in style change for those golfers.
I would agree. I do recommend that they get a fitting or at least test it out. Make sure that you have the head that matches you. Right now, there's 2 G410 releases, and I expect that that's going to increase as the year goes on. But I recommend people test it out. They might find that it's the driver that's going to keep them in the fairway.
Well, Josh, I think that probably wraps up episode 1.
I think it does. And we have a lot coming for you guys. If you liked episode 1, give us a like down below. Make sure you subscribe to THP Golf so you never miss an episode. And we have a lot of these coming up. Episode 2 will be in a couple weeks, and we're pretty excited to share coming up on the THP forum what episode 2 is all about.